Hello there, and welcome to the English Language Club. It's a Tuesday, so it is time for our weekly club hangout live stream. I'm Colin Monroe, and this is Tony Culper. Tony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. It's good to be here. How are you?
I'm very well too. So we've got a few people watching already. Give us a thumbs up and just let us know in the chat if you can hear us okay. That'll be great. I think we've got 18 people watching already. We've got Lolly Lolly in France and AJ in Monaco. But I can see we've got almost 20 people. So let us, say hi. Also, biology chemistry. We've got a question from biology chemistry. Should we jump straight into that, or do we want to give an update on how things are going in the world of English Language Club?
We can. Let's go ahead and maybe answer this question, and then we can give some other people some time to answer or to ask their questions.
Yes.
Remember, we depend on you guys for your questions. We're here to answer.
Okay, so I'll bring that question up. Just 1 second. Here we go. So, okay, it's quite a long one, so it doesn't fit on the screen. But good afternoon. How do you pronounce words with endings? Can I pronounce as? So that's not really that symbol. That's not. You mean the schwa sound and then an R?
Yeah, so this is
mother. Yeah. So you mean words that for example, he says mother. That word, the word mother, father, brother, words that end with er, they don't have an R when you write them in the phonetic transcription. They
in
just end
British English.
In British English.
Yes.
We just say mother, father. So the sound, the way that they end is just which is just that schwa sound. I hate to say schwa sound because schwa is not the sound, but you know what I mean. It's actually, what is it called? The mid-central vowel, because it's just coming from the middle. It's the most neutral sound, vowel sound. You're not really opening your mouth. You're not closing your mouth. It's a very common sound and a very strange sound in a way. So how is it different in American English, or do you do have the R?
So, well, I mean, it actually really does depend on the accent. But biology, chemistry, you're asking, can you pronounce it as an or with the R or and that really is a difference between British English and American-ish English, right? So in most accents in American English, we would say mother with the R sound, right? You almost don't really pronounce a vowel. It's just mother, right? Fire, after, together, winter, hour, year, right? For all those words. So in American English and Canadian English, you do pronounce it as in British English, it's more of an right? So yes, mother, winter, so on. Now, technically, there are American accents where they don't pronounce the R, and there are British accents where they do pronounce the R. But for the most part, that is the big difference. So it's not, should you do it this way? Should you do it this way? If you're, trying to speak British English with a more British accent, you wouldn't pronounce the R there. And if you are trying to speak with more an American accent or a Canadian accent, you would pronounce the R. I think South African accent and Australian and New Zealand also don't use the R there. Is that right, Colin?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then biology chemistry goes on to say, is it the same thing in the words after, together, winter, hour, year, and fire? So yes, it is more or less. They just end with that schwa sound, just the even though they're spelled very, very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's the heart of the question. Really, comes down to spelling. There's so many different ways that words are spelled, but it always makes that sound. So yes, and I think the R on the end of brother, together, I mean, then I did say the R, but that's just because I'm making those words as an example
Right.
in normal speech. Yeah, the R is a bit misleading. We often leave it out. So yeah, great question to get started with. Thank you very much for that. And welcome to the stream. I haven't seen you before, I don't think. So yeah, you're very welcome here. We've got a few more chats coming in. And a few more people. Let's see. We got Sumi Kim. Hello. Jorge Lopez in Guatemala. Rehana Amjo. Hello. Let's see. Suzanne's here. And Galaxy Brawl Stars. Hi. He was the guy saying he found us accidentally last week, and he's back again. So that's great.
Yeah.
So let's see. Sumi Kim's got a question here. Can you give me some tips about how to write an essay? So, Tony, you're probably better at this than I am. I was never very good at writing essays.
So, I assume you mean as a speaker of English as a second language, because that is a bit of a different answer for that. So, let me know if I'm let me know in the chat if I'm wrong. But I'm going to assume you mean as a speaker of English as a second language. So how do you write an essay in a language that's not your first language? And this is tough. Some people will say, well, come up with, like what you want to say in your own language and then translate. Unfortunately, most of us are actually pretty bad at translating. Translating is not the same. It doesn't use the same parts of your brain as speaking or coming up with ideas or writing an essay. And so sometimes the best thing to do is not to try to do that. Just try to, think about what ideas you have, think about what you want to say in English, and try doing that. Depending on what your skill in English is, that might be too much. And so if that is, don't worry about it. But that's something I would recommend. Try, the whole process from start to finish in English. The second thing that I would recommend, and again, any teacher, essay writing teacher will tell you this, which is to make an outline. So you write down kind of a list of your ideas, the things that you want to say. And you can write out like a whole sentence, or it can be as short as say something about this or whatever. Then put your list of ideas in the order that makes them the strongest, that gives it the strongest argument, and then kind of use that to write your essay. Just kind of expand it out. Was that enough information? I have taught this for years. I could talk for hours about it.
What about talking about an outline? So you obviously should sort of start with a kind of introduction to the topic and end with the conclusion. But what about the middle parts? How would you break that down?
So one thing I'll say is when you're thinking about writing an essay, don't start with an introduction and don't finish with your conclusion. The middle part is your essay. The introduction and the conclusion are kind of added on, right?
Right.
They're important. They're very important. Maybe the most important, but that's not really your essay. So when you're doing that idea of the outline, think about all the things that you actually want to say in this essay. Right? And then put them in whatever order you think works the best. Some people will say you should kind of come up with 3 main points and group all the things you want to say under one of those 3 points. But that doesn't necessarily have to happen. You can put them in whatever order you think makes it the strongest argument or the strongest writing. Then what you do, once you have outlined your essay, or maybe even written your essay, you write your introduction and your conclusion, because you can't really introduce something until you know what it is, until you've written it. So then you're going to say, this is what I'm going to explain. And then at the end, your conclusion, you say, this is why what I said was important, right? And that, I think, will really help you. We oftentimes too much think, okay, I know what I need to say so I can write my introduction. But no, the middle part of your essay is what you want to say. Anything, if you're writing about elephants, everything you want to say about elephants should be in the middle part. Then you write an introduction saying, this is what I'm going to tell you, and a conclusion saying, this is why what I said was important.
So that might be a little bit tricky if you're in an exam and you're having to write the essay out by hand. You kind of have to write the introduction first. But I guess you'd have planned it out. You'd have planned it out to an extent that you know what you're going to say, so you can then write the introduction.
At the minimum, you should write that outline first, like on a separate piece of paper or on the side or whatever. Write all of your ideas, and then maybe if you don't have space to rewrite them again or time, just number them, right? Then once you know everything that you're going to say, you can write the introduction first if you're like on an essay test and you have to do it quickly. But if you have time, it's usually better to write it last.
Yeah.
So that was a great question.
Yeah.
And feel free to ask us more things about that, because if you give us more specific cases, like how do you write a TOEFL essay or how do you write a university entrance essay, we can be more specific.
Great. Okay. Now, Suzanne's has got a few questions again, as always, which is great, about some vocabulary. So first one here is, what does decentralization of waste management mean? So decentralize is a term that's often used to talk about things being done instead of in one central place by a government or a bank or something like a central bank. It's sort of opened up and things are done in a more open way. So one example is sort of in banking. You have government central banks, which are kind of controlled by governments, but then something like Bitcoin is a way of decentralizing the world of finance. So decentralizing waste management, I guess that means.
So waste management is garbage and sewage, right? So it would basically mean instead of one organization dealing with all the garbage in a country or a city, you let a bunch of different companies or a bunch of different organizations deal with it in their area.
Yeah. So rather than the government coming up, organizing the whole thing for the whole country, they might outsource that process to different companies in different areas. I guess that's what that's talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So just to remind you, especially if you're new here, what we normally do is we just go through the comments from top to bottom. So as comments come in, you may think we're ignoring you, but in actual fact, we're just we haven't got to you yet. Yeah. So if you have posted a comment we haven't got to it yet, don't keep typing it in. We will get to it if we have time, which we should do. Let's move on. So Brawl Stars, I think this is similar to the question you asked last week about that sound with that ash symbol, and I talked about how it's confusing because that symbol is used in different contexts, and with it, what we talk about is within what is called IPA, or the International Phonetic Alphabet. And in IPA, in the International Phonetic Alphabet, it is pronounced A. But I think in certain languages where it's still used as part of the alphabet, I think it's used in Norwegian and Dutch, maybe. It's pronounced a different way. And then it's also used in Latin. Mm-hmm. Is it used in Greek as well?
No. I mean, the letters A and E don't exist in Greek. It would be a different.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think because it has sort of ancient uses that are no longer used, those ancient uses do still get used in things like computer games and TV shows, or novels. Where a character, it might be set in the Middle Ages or even earlier, where a character might have this symbol in their name, in which case it would be pronounced differently. Mm-hmm. Do you know what would be the pronunciation if that was Latin or Is it A?
So it's I. So the
I.
most the most iconic example of this is the word Caesar, like Julius Caesar, right? And it's pronounced in the way they talk about Latin nowadays, as they've analyzed how they think it was spoken, is Kaiser, like German for Kaiser. Because that was just the Germanic version of trying to say Caesar, right? We typically pronounce it a little bit differently, but that's how it was pronounced in Latin, as far as we know. 2,000 years ago. Yeah. I, which is why, again, so that's where the symbol comes from, is from Latin.
Yeah.
But because by the time people started using it in other languages and in things like the IPA, nobody spoke Latin anymore, like the way they spoke it when this letter first came into existence, or this symbol. It's not a letter; it's a symbol.
Yeah.
And so, because nobody actually knew how to pronounce it, people started using it as letters in different alphabets, or as symbols in different things, like the IPA, and different people chose to pronounce it in different ways. And nowadays we do know how it was pronounced, but it's too late. It's just been used for so many different things now. Yeah.
And that's where the confusion comes. I've also seen the word used in the symbol used in the word encyclopedia, as in P to say E, like, or is it? Yeah. Encyclopedia. But yeah, so it's
yes. Yeah. So in the IPA, it has a very specific sound.
Yes.
In any other context, there's no one thing that it means. Again, because it's just become a very broadly used symbol that came from, because Latin was so influential, right?
Yeah. So that's your answer, Galaxy. It's very broadly used, and in different contexts, it's used in different ways. In IPA, it's but it may not be. That may not be the way that you're seeing it. Okay, so now we've got a few more phrases from Susanta. Let's see. What does complementary or parallel vaccine mean? So vaccine's big news this week. Now, I think in this context, complementary or parallel, because it means yesterday there was sort of big news about one particular vaccine, but there's lots of vaccines in development. So a parallel vaccine or a complementary vaccine, I think, would be referring to some of these other vaccines that are being developed. But the word go on.
Well, I think a parallel vaccine means something very specific, and it has to do with it more has to do with the process of how they create vaccines. So it basically means that they're trying to, in order to make one vaccine, they're trying a bunch of different things all at once. Where parallel means, lines following each other but not touching. So that's what they're doing. They're not, instead of just having one team work on one vaccine, they're all aiming for the same point, but you've got a bunch of different teams building a bunch of different vaccines. They're different vaccines, but hopefully for the same thing. And then whichever ones work, they learn from each other, and they eventually converge into one final vaccine.
Yeah. It's like they're all coming at the same problem. There's lots of teams coming at the same problem, and they're trying different things simultaneously in parallel, in order to get to the destination faster. But then the word complementary here. So complementary implies that if two things are complementary, then they're helping each other, or they work well together.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that could work in the context of vaccines. Literally, like having you wouldn't need to have two different vaccines in order to. I mean, maybe I don't know enough about that sort of thing.
I mean, at some point, there are very technical terms. I will say I have not heard this term used correctly on the news, so I would be a little bit careful of it. But what they mean, what they mean when they say that, unless you are hearing like a medical professional being interviewed, if you hear a news person say this, what they're meaning is they're talking about different vaccines for the same thing, that hopefully one of them will work, is the idea.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on because we've got a few more thick questions like this from Susanna. What does word narrative mean in politics? That's an interesting one. I don't.
So actually, the word narrative means the same. It's the same thing regardless of whether you're talking about politics. When you're talking about a topic, other than like the narrative in a story, but it's very similar. The narrative in a story is the story of what happened. It's kind of the events in the story. The narrative, anything else, is the story of what's happening. So the narrative in scientific, for instance, the development of a vaccine, people can say, okay, well, this group of people were working over here and they influenced these people and that influences these people and this is the result. It's a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, like a story does. And so in any kind of thing that's happening, sorry?
Like a chain of events.
A chain of events. So anytime that something is happening that's very complicated, like an election or like international, politics or normalization of different things that happen, what people really want is we don't want to know all of the complexity. We want a narrative. We want a story that explains the basic events that are happening. And so oftentimes, especially on the news, you'll hear people saying, so what's the narrative? What they want to know, what's the story here? What's something simple that I can explain to somebody else?
Yeah. So it's the story of politics. There's some interesting stories happening in politics at the moment, which we won't get into. And then let's see another one here. Backlash has been galvanizing. What is galvanizing?
Galvanizing is a great word. So the word galvanizing actually comes from like galvanic, which means having to do with electricity, which is weird. So what the word galvanize means is it means you dip something in liquid metal and you run electricity through it. And the electricity causes the liquid metal to spread all over the object. And you can encase something in a very, very thin layer of metal to protect it. For instance, like you can put an iron nail and you can galvanize it with zinc. And that way the zinc doesn't rust, and so it protects the iron nail from rusting. We use this as a metaphor in different situations. It's like running electricity through something. Is to galvanize it. It's to you create a reaction, like empowering. However, it also very specifically sometimes means brings us together, right? To kind of unify us, like that metal slowly moving across the surface of something being galvanized. So in this case, the backlash, like when there's a lot of backlash, people are angry about something, it unites them. It brings people together, but it also like gives them a surge, like you're running electricity through them, right? So that's what galvanizing means.
In that context, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's those three things are what galvanizing means in all contexts. It either means cover something in metal using electricity, or like shock people, like running electricity through them, or bringing people together.
Yeah. Okay. So. So moving on to a grammar question here from Lolly Lolly. She says, I have lived or I have been living. Thank you. So present perfect or present perfect continuous. Well, they're both right. It depends on the context. So with this example, they're actually very similar meaning, really. So I could say, I have lived in London for 5 years. I have been living in London for 5 years. Those are very similar, almost identical meanings. And that's because the verb live is something that you can do continuously for a long period of time. But if you were to say, hopefully, well, generally we don't live for a little while and then stop living and then live again for a little while, but something that you do start and stop, if you say, I've played football 3 times this year, and you want to specify like a number of times. So I have played football 3 times this year. Then you're saying within that period, but this period is not finished yet. That's a key thing. I've played football 3 times. but then you can't. So then it's different. I have been playing football. Then you couldn't use the present perfect continuous in the same way there, because it's not something that happens a period of time.
Remember the perfect tenses, you're saying, I'm talking about what's done. That's what you mean when you're using the perfect tenses. I'm talking about what's finished, and I'm talking about now, or if you're past. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Even if it's present, even if you're talking about present, you're still talking about what has been finished before now. But you're talking about sort of the present moment and how it's kind of has an effect on now, or just what has happened before.
So you're emphasizing what's finished and what's done and how that has affected you. But when you use the perfect continuous, you're still emphasizing what's been done, but you're also emphasizing, but it's not finished yet. So for instance, if you just say, I've lived in this city for 4 years, then you're just talking about the amount of time that you've spent there. But if you so you might say, I've lived here for 4 years and I'm thinking about moving. But if you're talking about the fact that you have lived there, but you are still living there, you're emphasizing the fact that it's not done yet. Then you say been, right? Have been. So I have been living here for 4 years and I love it, right? I don't want to leave. You're emphasizing the fact that it's not over. For the example of playing football, you might say, I've played football. I have played football 3 times this year. But for instance, let's say you're in the middle of playing football and you say, oh, we have been playing for an hour and I'm so tired, because you're emphasizing how much time you spent, but you're also emphasizing the fact that it's not over. And that's the difference between have and have been doing, is with have been, you're emphasizing that it's not over yet.
So yeah, great question. And
yes, it's
a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about Inside English.
Indeed.
We've been very, very busy this last week because those of you who are regulars will know we are in the process of writing a course, and we're very, very close to not finishing it, but releasing it. Because what we're going to do is release the first few modules, and then we're going to continue writing it so that people can start using it before it's finished.
Yeah, and we're going to do early access, so you guys can go ahead and get started on it. Yeah. So the current situation is it's been finished for a week or two now, and in terms of filming the videos, and we've been working on the website. If you go to the website now, you will see it looks very different to how it used to, and that's because we've been updating it in order to better display the course. And you still can't access the course through the website yet, but we're very close to making that possible. With things like this, there's always things that don't work properly, and we're in the process of fixing all those bugs. So very soon we will be announcing how you can get onto Inside English. That's the name of the course. And if you watch the live streams, and if you are a member here on YouTube, you will get some sort of a discount, sort of promotion. We're not sure what form that will take yet, but stay tuned. Join the club here on YouTube, and you'll get something. And that leads nicely into Jorge's question. He says, guys, can you tell me, or can you say something about the difference between language and grammar? So Inside English is essentially a grammar course. We don't really call it that because grammar's got connotations. People think it's boring. But really, it's grammar is the science, or the how language works, or how a language works. Whereas language would have other elements like vocabulary, pronunciation, things like that. Is that right? Would you agree with that, Tony? Yeah. So exactly. The language is everything. What language you speak. So for instance, English is more than just its grammar, right? English is also its vocabulary, right? And some languages have very, very similar grammar, but different vocabulary, right? And then other languages have very, very similar vocabulary, but different grammar, right? So yeah, grammar is just one part of language. Yeah, pronunciation, vocabulary, alphabet, idioms, all of this, right? And the grammar is specifically the rules of how the language works.
Yeah, great answer. Hope that's helpful. Fabian, let us know. Sorry, no, Jorge. Fabian's the next question. So actually, let me just one thing, Jorge. I just want to correct you here. When you say tell,
yes,
you don't tell something, you tell someone. So the object of the verb tell is the person you're talking to. You should have used the word say here. Can you guys say something about? So that's a different say and tell. It's are two verbs that people often make mistakes with, yeah, I really want to do some videos on that. So yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about that. So yeah, Fabian, hi there. Why does cartoon sound different to door? I mean the OO. Is there a rule? So this is one of the difficult things about English: the pronunciation and the spelling. The way we spell things is not consistent. Is not always consistent with how we pronounce them, and in English. So yeah, there is no rule really. I don't think, but just the OO can sometimes be pronounced oo, as in cartoon, and sometimes pronounced or, as in along with the R, I suppose it makes or, which is a separate sound.
Right, and it can also just make like brook or took, right? This is
similar to tune. That's similar to cartoon, yeah. Brook, cartoon.
They're different sounds, but that is to say, the vast majority of the time it makes an oo sound, or sometimes a shorter sound, which is really just a shortening of that. And so where that comes from is words that are used more often tend to get simpler over time because people are using them a lot and they don't have time to bother with long, complicated words, right?
That's why irregular verbs are always the most common ones.
Exactly. So this is actually an example of irregularity in pronunciation. There is a common pronunciation for OO, but over time words, like, it shows up in a lot of very common words, and so over time those words have shortened, especially when they mix with a different sound that is also shortened, like an R. That kind of changes it to a very different sound. But that's the only rule, is that generally speaking, the more common a word is, the more likely it is for its pronunciation to change to get easier.
Yeah.
Or shorter.
Yeah.
Or simpler.
So I would just add there that that's a situation where trying to find a rule and learn the rule is not going to be helpful. That's because there's going to be more exceptions, or as many exceptions as there are things that follow the rule.
I mean, in this case, there is not a rule.
Right.
There's no way you can say, like, oh, if it comes after this letter or that letter, it's not a rule. It's a way that it works. And here at English Language Club, that's really what we focus on, is understanding how something works as opposed to a bunch of rules, because rules are always going to have exceptions. Should we talk for a little bit about internalizing, what that means, Colin?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Yeah.
So you might wonder, well, how does the native speaker know when to use the difference between cartoon and door, right? And the answer is they don't learn a list of rules. They don't know the rules. If you tried to get a typical English speaker to explain why they pronounce brook and door differently, or why they pronounce rough and bow differently, they won't be able to explain it. What's happened is, earlier we said grammar is the rules for how our language works, and that's true, but it's not a list of rules that you can memorize. It's all of the little kind of rules that make the world work. It's like, you don't have to have a degree in physics to be able to play football, right? There's lots of things happening behind the scenes, but you don't need to know them because your brain is really good at just dealing with it, right?
Yeah,
You've
great
gotten used
example,
to
yeah.
those rules. You've just gotten used to them. And what we say is that's internalized. So a native speaker has internalized the rules of their language. But you can't, that doesn't mean you can sit out and write them as a list. And so what's important to understand is there are rules that are important to learn. Big, major things that explain how things work in English. Like, the fact that irregular words are the more common ones. And they just change, and you can't necessarily figure out how they are going to change because it takes place over hundreds of years. So we really focus on understanding the big rules for how things work, like how the structure of sentences works.
Yeah.
How, like, for instance, when we were talking about how perfect means something that's finished, that's a really good example of one of those big rules. Yes, there are exceptions, but you can't memorize all the exceptions. If you understand the rules and then you use those words often enough, your brain will figure it out, just like your brain has figured out how to kick a football into a goal without perfectly calculating the parabolic arc and the wind resistance and the Coriolis effect and all the other stuff, right? You just internalize the rules by using them, not by memorizing them.
Yeah, it's instinctive.
It's instinctive. Yeah.
Like kicking a ball. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay, so hope that's helpful, Fabian. Let us know. So Dexy. Hello, Dexy. So they're saying I also have a big problem with as biology chemistry in British English with the schwa endings. So can I in British English pronounce it as e.g. year instead of year? Well, so look, so the sound there you're talking about, the upside down triangle, that is that sound is What we're talking about is So I think the difference is that they're both. I think one is sort of the open. So is an open vowel and is a mid vowel, but they are different. So if you were to say year, that's not right. So they are different. They are similar sounds, but the main difference is that with the mouth is open more than with but they are different. And if you say one when you should say the other, that will sound wrong. So yeah, year, it's not I hope that's helpful. Let's see. So English with Heidi says, hi, teachers. Hello, Heidi. How are you? She's good evening from Kerala. Where's Kerala? I don't know.
Is that in India? Is that a city or a state in India?
Let's see. Yeah. Let us know in the chat. I'll carry on. So we've got a question here. Question here from Heidi. Can you tell the difference between the letter pronunciations C and K? Okay. So since I've learned a little bit about phonetics, I've developed a kind of dislike of the letter C, even though my name begins with the letter C. I feel like the letter C is completely unnecessary because it's either pronounced K, like a K, or it's pronounced S, as in the word cereal. So it could be an S, it's either pronounced S or pronounced K. So that's why the letter C doesn't appear on the phonetic chart, because it doesn't have its own sound. It's always either K or S, and those sounds have other letters. So the C is really an unusual letter in that way, and it's kind of unnecessary in a way. But yeah, so can you tell can you tell the difference between the pronunciation of C and K? Because they are often pronounced the same.
I mean, the K sound that C makes is the same. Like, there's not a difference in how you pronounce the C sound that is a K and the K, like they're the same. It's the difference is that the C sometimes isn't pronounced that, it's pronounced with an S. Yeah.
Yeah, not with an S. It's pronounced with a s, as S.
I mean, it is pronounced
S,
as if it were an S. So
as if it were an S. Yeah.
the thing about this, like the reality is not that C is the odd one out. The reality is that the K is the odd one out. K. I mean, our alphabet we get from Latin, and Latin did not have the letter K. It had the letter C, which was pronounced K, like a K. Okay. And they included the letter K because they wrote a lot of Greek words. The letter K is a Greek word, or a Greek letter, not a Latin letter. Okay. So I mean, again, when I was saying like that the most typical Latin word, Caesar, starts with a C, that's pronounced K, because the letter C in Latin is just the K sound. K. So Kaiser, not Caesar. You don't pronounce it with an S. The S is a different letter. Now, unfortunately, because we now had two letters that made the same sound, over time, the C started being used for multiple different things. Sometimes they'd use it when they meant a K. Sometimes they would use it when they mean an S. And so that's what's going on with the C, is that it has become, it's the less popular of the two, and so it's kind of become multiple uses. There are, however, rules for when you use which pronunciation. Right, when it comes before an E,
an I or an E, yeah,
I or a Y, I think, then it's pronounced like an S. But if it comes for an O, for instance, like in Colin, you pronounce it like a K.
Yeah.
So the C isn't so much. There is no C sound. The letter C either means an S, if it's in front of an E or an I, or it means a K if it's in front of something else.
Yeah. Well, you mean it either means a S or a K.
Actually, no. What I mean is it means the letter S or it means the letter K. But yes, that's true as well. It's pronounced differently depending. But really, it's a letter that just means it's written instead of an S or a K because it looks better. It's a letter that just means I could be an S or a K, but I look cooler than either of those. That's literally the only thing it means. I mean, it's
Well, if I can invent my own language, then I would get rid of the letter C.
That's true, but see, I love the fact that there's this cool history thing that's been going on.
No, that is really interesting.
Years about the letter C, and that nowadays the letter C is not so much a letter that has a pronunciation as it's a placeholder that in your mind you replace it with either an S or a K as you say it or as you read it. And this is not particular to only English. There's lots of examples of this where there are sounds or letters or parts of something that don't really have a meaning of their own anymore. They're just there to make the word look cooler and nothing else.
Yeah. Great. Okay, let's move on. Kerala is a state in India.
Okay, I thought so.
Great. Yeah. So hello to everyone in India. Let's see. So Susanna has another question. From 9 to 5, from 9 till 5, from 9 through 5, from 9 up until 5. What is the difference? So from 9 to 5.
So of those in that particular case, you would only use from 9 to 5, right?
Yeah. So if you're talking about the hours, like a working day, from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, 9 to 5 is what we talk about.
Well, yeah. So up till and up until, you'd pretty much only use with one. You wouldn't use with two. So you wouldn't say like 9 until 5 or 9 till 5. You would say, oh, how late are you working? Up until 5 or until 5 or till 5, right? You don't usually use until with two numbers, just with the one. And then the through there, I just don't think we would say it that way.
Yeah. I was just checking this week again. We're on Facebook as well as on YouTube. So I was just having a quick check to see if anyone is on Facebook, because we haven't seen any comments from Facebook yet. So if you are on Facebook, drop us a comment and we'll say hi. And that sort of ties in with your Galaxy said, how long will you be streaming? We tend to do these for about an hour, so we've got about 15 to 20 minutes left today. So yeah, let's see. AJ in Monaco says, what words can you use instead of good?
What a great question.
Yeah, so great. But then it's funny, with a lot of adjectives, you get kind of the base adjective, like good, and then you get other adjectives that are kind of either a more extreme version or maybe a slightly less version. So it's kind of synonymous. They have the same meaning, but maybe amplified or with a slightly different meaning. Like, so you could say brilliant or excellent. Those are kind of extreme versions. Although brilliant,
like fine or okay, right? Or
yeah,
lesser.
they would be slightly lesser. Yeah,
yeah.
So yeah, lots of any other words for good?
I mean, there's so many. Wonderful, phenomenal,
wonderful,
outstanding, amazing,
awesome,
awesome. Or on the flip side of it, like so, or all right, or not too bad, or things like this, right? There's lots of different ones. Yeah.
And Galaxy Brawl Stars adds okay, or I think it means decent.
Yes, decent.
Yeah, decent.
Yeah.
Great. Let's see. So, okay, here's an interesting question. Hi, why called glottals? Okay, so glottals is referring to certain types of sound, I believe, and I believe that's sort of kind of throaty sounds. Is that?
It is. So
a glottal, you get the glottal.
It's named after your glottis or the epiglottis. It's a part of your throat, the part that opens and closes. A lot of the sounds are named either by how the air moves or what part of your mouth you're using. Again, we're always talking about how pronunciation is physical. So a labia is this Latin for lips. So it's like sounds you make with your lips, right? Dental, that's Latin for teeth. Sounds you make with your teeth, right? Glottal means that sounds you make in the back of your throat, like the glottal stop, like or something like that.
Would a g sound be a glottal sound?
I don't know if g is glottal in English or not. Glottals are much more common in other languages. Again, we don't particularly focus on these terms as much, but they can be very useful once you start realizing they talk about the different part of your mouth. Right, so labials and dentals and alveolar the alveolar ridge is the ridge right behind your teeth,
behind the teeth,
at the top of your mouth. Yeah,
and here.
Right. So that can be really useful for figuring out. Oh, I understand why I'm saying this wrong. I'm not saying it with the right part of my mouth. I should be using my lips or my teeth or whatever. Right, and then some of them also have to do with how the air goes through. Plosives are ones where you suddenly the air is stopped and then suddenly it explodes outward, right?
Yeah.
And then the fricatives are ones where you create friction. You close the air gap to something very small and you kind of just force the air out, like something like that. And so, a lot of these names come from the Latin words for parts of the mouth or throat, in the case of glottal. Glottal doesn't mean throat. It means it's like a glottis. There's like a specific part of your throat that opens and closes. But basically for words that sounds that you make in your throat.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting question.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, Galaxy says, "Who's the guy you're with? Does he have a channel?" So presumably you're talking to me because I'm the guy in most of the videos. And this is Tony. He's a friend of mine. He's helped me with the writing of a lot of with a few of the videos I've done in the past. But he's helped me a lot with the writing of the videos I'm working on at the moment on the course, which is not on YouTube. It's going to be on my own website or our own website, because I feel like this is our project together now. This is Tony. He doesn't have his own channel, but
not right now. Maybe sometime in the future I might start something talking about literature, for instance, but not right now.
Yeah, that would be great. Cool. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see. From Fabian. Fabian, what are some words that non-native people use wrong and don't sound polite? I want a beer.
So
yes, go on. Yeah.
A good rule of thumb here in English is that if you want to be more polite, be more indirect. So instead of saying exactly something, you talk around it. So instead of saying, now, there's nothing wrong with "I want a beer," but you wouldn't use that to ask someone to give you a beer. You wouldn't say, "Excuse me, I want a beer." It's just a little bit not impolite, but it's a little. So we try to say things. So I would. If someone says, "Do you need anything?" You say, "Oh, I wouldn't mind a beer," or "A beer would be nice." Or you could.
But I think, and I think in a lot of languages, you might go into a bar or a restaurant and say, "Give me a beer."
Yeah.
And that would be, in English, that's very direct, and that could come across as rude.
And you see this in movies a lot. People say, they'll go and say, "Give me a beer," right? But again, that's not necessarily how you will see this sometimes, right?
Especially sometimes they're being rude deliberately. That's the character,
because they don't care about the the person like on the other end. It's sometimes people are more rude when ordering food than they should be. But when you're talking to other people and you're intentionally trying to be polite, so you might say, "Could you please get me a beer?" So not only are you saying please, you're changing it from "please get me a beer" to "could you," right? You're making it indirect, or "would you mind," or "can you," or something like this.
Or
so
do you have the time?
Yes,
is another one. That's because really, technically, you could answer that by just saying yes. If a question, grammatically speaking, if a question starts with an auxiliary verb, do, you can answer yes or no.
Exactly.
But in that case, it would be they're just being indirect to be more polite.
Yes. And so that's not just when you're asking for things. Like even sometimes, like if your boss is telling you what to do, they'll say, "If you have time, would you do those reports?" And again, sometimes your boss will just say, "Hey, those reports are late. Do the reports." But a lot of times in English, we go out of our way to be polite, which is really funny when you think about it, because English-speaking people are not known for their politeness. And I think part of this
I think we are in British English. I think we're quite polite, more so than Americans.
More so than Americans. I mean, it doesn't take much, right? But
and that depends on which part.
As a language group, certain nationalities or languages are just known for their extreme politeness, right? A lot of Asian ethnicities and stuff like this. Whereas English speakers are not particularly known for this, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that like, for instance, in some Asian cultures, there's a lot of behaviors that they do to make something be polite that in English we would see as like, for instance, in most English cultures, bowing is very, very unusual. In North American, it's even seen as it's seen as strange because we don't like to think of people as being subservient in our culture. And so if someone's bowing, it makes us feel like, oh no, I feel like this person is subservient, and that's no good. We don't want people to act that way, to act subservient. And so it can be off-putting. But in English, we're not polite by the things we do so much as the way we say things. And so that often doesn't translate into other languages well. So you'll get people ordering food in, say, an American going to France and ordering food, and they don't know how to say, "Would you mind?" or "If you don't mind, could you get me something?" And so they only have the language to just say it more directly. But because they don't have the other behaviors that help people see that you're being polite, they often come across as really impolite, when I don't think that the culture is necessarily that impolite by itself.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Now, just
really
quickly, just quick hi to Adebayo, who is watching on Facebook. Thank you for responding there. Now, we've got a few questions from Heidi just before this. So I'm just going to do your second question first. She says, is it British accent or American accent? So I am from the UK, so I am speaking with a British accent, but Tony is from Florida, so he's speaking with a an American accent, but he's living in Canada, so he might have a bit of a Canadian tinge to his accent. Do you think is that accurate?
It really depends. Sometimes I'll say something and it'll come out super American, and sometimes not. It really depends on who I've been talking to. But yes, you will hear me say things that aren't necessarily a normal American thing to say.
Okay, so Heidi's other question: which dialect is more near to the origin or the original English?
So the answer really here is neither. Neither is very similar to the original English. If you want to hear,
well, what is? There's no such thing really as the original English.
There's multiple original Englishes.
English is a combination of Greek and Latin and lots of other things.
If you mean but still there is English isn't 2,000 years old, but there is an original English. If you mean which one is more similar to the way they spoke English when the American colonies split off, then American English is more close to it. But neither of them is particularly close to English as it was spoken 400 or 500 years ago. If you want to hear how English was spoken a few hundred years ago, look up some Shakespeare. Look up like authentic Shakespeare or something like this. It's very different, and it can be hard to understand. But then if you go back even further than that, it's not like you couldn't even understand it. Maybe one day on the channel I'll read some Chaucer. So English has changed a ton in the last 800 years or so, and it's not really nothing that is spoken nowadays is comparable to original English. So there is no,
and I would question whether such a thing as original English exists.
It would have been a different language. Anything that you would call original English, like the language that Beowulf was written in, it's like a different language. It's not similar. It's more different than English is from say French.
We're not speaking original English.
No.
And
so there is no right English, is what that means. No, Australian English isn't better or worse than Canadian English, isn't better or worse than British English. Right. They're all just different. There is no proper one. Yeah. You will hear people.
And when you think about it, it's always immigration is what's changed the language. So when immigration and conquering, I suppose. So when the French conquered the Saxons in 1066, a lot of French words came into the language. I suppose Latin and Greek. Yeah, the Latin and Greek would have been from before.
Well, the Latin and Greek came through the French, but the people who conquered England weren't French. They themselves were immigrants from Scandinavia. So they were speaking French, but mixed heavily with a Scandinavian language. And in England at the time, they were speaking German mixed in heavily with Scandinavian languages because of wave after wave of immigration and conquest. So and it took hundreds of years for the Scandinavian-ish French and the Scandinavian-ish German to meld into what we call English now. And it wasn't. And like Susanto points out, English is still changing every day. This is one of English's strengths as a language, is it's just totally, it's like a Mighty Morphin Ninja Power Ranger. It just constantly changes as it is experiencing new languages. Yeah. But so don't let anyone tell you, that there is one correct English, because it's just not true.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to skip ahead a little because we're running out of time. We've got time for, I think, one more question. So Nurus says, hi there. Can you guys tell me what is the difference between good and well? I mean, when we have to use good and when we use well. So, Tony, do you want to...
This is simple. Like if you look at the rule, it's very simple. Good is an adjective. So you use it like when you are describing a noun or after like the word is, whereas well is an adverb, so you use it to describe a verb. So if someone says, how are you feeling? You say, I am feeling well, because you're saying how, like you're using that to describe the verb feel, right? Where if someone says, oh, it is such a good day, right? Because day is a noun, and so you use an adjective to describe it. But the reality is that the other thing is that well refers to your health. So you don't talk about like I'm feeling good or are you sick? No, I'm good. No, you're supposed to say I'm well, because well refers to your health. But the reality is that people more and more use good for lots of different things. So
but hang on a minute. If you say I am, I am well. So well is describing the verb to be. It's an adverb affecting be, right?
So when you say am, you could say good or well. But if you're talking about your health, the correct one is well, because wellness refers to your health, like salut or something like this, right? Or bienestar, right? Like it refers to your health. But people say good for these things all the time. They say, I'm feeling good, or you did good. Like those are not grammatically correct, but they are very common in English. And except in extremely formal situations, they're okay. Even if you don't want to say things that way because you want to be grammatically correct, you have to understand it because people are going to be saying that a lot.
Great. Okay, well, it's been a great lesson. It's great to see Galaxy back. He says he has to go. So thank you everyone for watching. And as we were saying earlier, we are going to have some big news, big announcements coming soon. So make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the bell icon, and maybe head over to the website and join up to the mailing list as well.
Yes.
Because then you will hear some more details as soon as they're ready. But we're very close to having the course ready. It's difficult to say exactly when it will be ready, though, because it's not ready yet. And there's, problems we have to fix. It's difficult to know how long those things will take, but it is going to be soon. We're very close. So give us a thumbs up if you're watching and you've enjoyed the show and you found it helpful. And thank you for watching. And we will see you next week.